In the history of philosophy, there are names that inspire reverence: Plato, Aristotle, Confucius, Marcus Aurelius. Their works are quoted in classrooms, carved into stone, and treated with solemn respect. And then there is Diogenes of Sinope, the man who lived in a barrel, mocked the powerful, defied all social conventions, and earned the title of the original Cynic. To many he is remembered as a clown or eccentric. But beneath the strange anecdotes lies a philosophy both radical and profound, one that has echoed across centuries, a philosophy of freedom, of stripping life to its bare essentials, of tearing down the illusions of society to reveal the truth. Diogenes was born around 412 BC in Sinope, a Greek colony on the Black Sea. His father was a banker, and some accounts suggest Diogenes became embroiled in a scandal involving the debasement of currency. Whether true or not, the story became a metaphor for his life. Diogenes, it was said, debased the currency of society itself, exposing its false values and questioning everything others took for granted. Forced to leave Sinope, he travelled to Athens, the beating heart of philosophy, and there he began to develop the lifestyle and ideas that would make him infamous. Athens at the time was a city of wealth and spectacle, but also a philosophical ferment. Plato was writing dialogues on justice and the ideal forms. Sophists argued over rhetoric and persuasion. Aristocrats and merchants gathered in the agora to display their wealth and influence. Into this bustling city walked Diogenes, poor, homeless, and unafraid. While others debated metaphysics in lecture halls, Diogenes made his life his philosophy. He took as his inspiration Antisthenes, a pupil of Socrates who preached simplicity and virtue over luxury and power. But Diogenes went further, stripping away not only wealth, but all social conventions. He owned almost nothing. He lived in a large ceramic jar, often later described as a barrel, in the marketplace. He carried a cloak, a staff, and a small bowl. Even the bowl he discarded one day, after watching a child drink water with cupped hands. If a child could live without it, so could he. Stories about Diogenes often sound like jokes, but they reveal the essence of his philosophy. When asked what wine he liked best, he replied, "That which belongs to another." When people mocked him for begging, he answered, "If I flatter people, you call me charming. If I beg from them, you call me shameless." It is the same act. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, approached Diogenes as he lay sunning himself and offered to grant him any wish, Diogenes simply said, "Stand out of my sunlight." In that moment, the conqueror of nations was reduced to irrelevance. Power, wealth, glory, all meant nothing compared to the simple act of enjoying the warmth of the sun. This was not mere insolence, it was philosophy in action. Diogenes believed that the structures of society, wealth, reputation, politics, even many forms of morality, were artificial and corrupting. To live virtuously was to live in accordance with nature, free from these illusions. If that meant defying convention, so be it. When he ate in the marketplace something considered shameful, in Athens, he replied, "It was in the marketplace. I felt hungry." When people mocked him for masturbating in public, he answered that he wished he could relieve hunger as easily by rubbing his stomach. To modern ears, these stories may sound absurd or crude, but for Diogenes they were demonstrations. Human needs are simple. It is society that complicates them. At the heart of cynicism was the pursuit of autarkia, or self-sufficiency. Freedom was not achieved by gaining wealth or status, but by needing nothing. The man who desires little is invincible. No tyrant can threaten him. No fortune can sway him. No opinion can bind him. By living in poverty and stripping life down to the essential, Diogenes claimed a freedom greater than that of kings. He became, in a sense, richer than the rich, because his wealth could never be stolen. Diogenes' philosophy also had a moral edge. He saw hypocrisy everywhere. In politicians who spoke of justice while seeking power, in philosophers who praised virtue while living in comfort, in ordinary citizens who chased luxuries and honours while ignoring truth. By mocking them, by behaving outrageously, he held up a mirror to society. His shamelessness, or anaideia, was deliberate. By violating taboos, he forced people to confront the arbitrariness of their values. If one act of nature was accepted in private, but condemned in public, what did that say about the foundations of morality? For Diogenes, shame was not in simple natural acts, but in greed, dishonesty, and pretense. Consider again his encounter with Alexander. To most philosophers, an audience with the king was an opportunity for patronage or influence. To Diogenes, Alexander was just another man. His request for the conqueror to step aside was a philosophical statement. You may rule the world, but you do not rule the sun, and you do not rule me. Legend has it that Alexander later said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Whether or not the story is true, it captures the paradox. The man with nothing was in some sense freer, and perhaps even greater, than the man who possessed everything. The Cynics believed that virtue was the only true good, and that it could be attained by rejecting artificial desires. They criticised the pursuit of wealth, power, and fame, seeing these as distractions that enslaved people to others' opinions. Diogenes in particular believed that by living simply, one could return to a state of harmony with nature. Dogs became his symbol, hence the word cynic from kynikos, meaning dog-like. Dogs, after all, lived without shame, satisfied their natural needs openly, and were loyal only to what was real. Diogenes embraced the comparison. He ate, slept, and acted like a dog, and in doing so declared himself freer than those trapped in the cages of convention. His philosophy was not merely negation. It contained a positive vision, a call to authenticity, to courage, to stripping away the false and embracing what is essential. In some ways, it anticipated later movements. The Stoics, who would dominate Roman philosophy, admired Diogenes' self-sufficiency and his disdain for luxury. Early Christians too saw parallels in his rejection of wealth and status, though they softened his shameless provocations. Even modern existentialists, in their calls to authenticity and rejection of bad faith, echo his spirit. Diogenes' life forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How much of what we do is truly necessary? How much of what we value is real? And how much is illusion created by society? If wealth, power, and reputation vanished tomorrow, who would we be? For Diogenes, the answer was simple. Strip away everything and live according to nature. Eat when hungry, sleep when tired, speak truth without fear. In that radical simplicity, he found a freedom most people never touch. Of course, there are criticisms. Diogenes' philosophy, taken literally, is impractical. Few could or would abandon society entirely, live homeless, and scorn every convention. His shameless acts alienated many and bordered on nihilism. Yet perhaps Diogenes never intended for everyone to imitate him exactly. Perhaps his role was that of a gadfly, like Socrates before him, a man who lived outrageously in order to expose the absurdities of others. By living as he did, he forced society to question itself. His barrel became not just a dwelling but a symbol, a stage on which he acted out a drama of philosophical defiance. When Diogenes died, sometime around 323 BC, the same year as Alexander, he left behind no written works. His philosophy survives through anecdotes, fragments, and the legends that gathered around his name. Some scholars dismiss him as a buffoon. Others see in him a radical truth-teller, a man who embodied philosophy in its rawest form, not in books, but in life. And perhaps that is his enduring lesson. Philosophy is not merely theory. It is not confined to the academy or the lecture hall. It is a way of living, a stance toward the world. For Diogenes, that stance was one of radical honesty, fearless simplicity, and utter independence. He challenged not only his fellow Athenians, but all of us across time. Are we living in truth, or are we enslaved by illusions? Do we possess our lives, or are we possessed by our possessions? 2,000 years later, the image of Diogenes still resonates. The ragged man in his barrel, mocking the mighty laughing at convention, living with nothing and yet claiming to lack nothing. He reminds us that freedom is not found in wealth or status, but in the courage to strip life to its core. His life, scandalous and strange, was a philosophy enacted with every breath. And so, when we recall the philosopher who lived in a barrel, we should not see only a clown or a troll. We should see a man who dared to ask what was truly necessary, who dared to live without fear of ridicule, who dared to remind the world that money, power, and even kings could not buy the sun. In his shamelessness there was a kind of purity, in his rejection of society a challenge to its falsehoods, and in his barrel a freedom greater than that of empires. Diogenes of Sinope the Cynic lived in a way few could follow, but his philosophy endures because it confronts us with a truth both unsettling and liberating, that to need nothing is to be free.